That the descriptions of what Assad inflicted on his own people sound a little familiar. They sound like some of what Saddam Hussein inflicted on Iraqis during the 1990s. And listen to this remark from the Secretary of State about the danger of not acting.
It matters because if we choose to live in a world where a thug and a murderer like Bashar al-Assad can gas thousands of his own people with impunity, even after the United States and our allies said no, and then the world does nothing about it, there will be no end to the test of our resolve and the dangers that will flow from those others who believe that they can do as they will.
John Bolton's a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations during President Bush's term and a Fox News contributor. Ambassador, good to see you.
Glad to be with you, Jamie.
What a developing story. I want to ask you, first of all, about those comparisons to the fact that the Bush administration had a big decision to make. Saddam Hussein was taken out, and now Bashar al-Assad.
Well, this has been fascinating to watch for those who criticize the Bush administration for its reliance on imperfect intelligence, and Bush was criticized for that. In fact, all intelligence is imperfect. You have to make a decision based on the best information you have. President Bush was continually accused for acting unilaterally, when in fact, in the case of overthrowing Saddam Hussein, he had a coalition of between 2 and 3 dozen nations at any given time. So far in this episode, it looks like we have France. The President Bush was criticized for not getting express authorization from the United Nations Security Council. And here, we're not going to have express authorization from the UN Security Council. So let me just say, personally, as somebody who was frequently criticized by Joe Biden and John Kerry and Barack Obama, we're only missing Chris Dodd here, but as somebody who was frequently criticized for being a unilateralist, while I oppose the use of force against Syria, I am delighted that the Obama administration is about to act unilaterally with no approval from the UN Security Council. I think we should all take due note of that.
It's almost as if they sort of put the UN aside. It's not that important when Secretary Kerry mentioned Russian obstructionism, right?
Yeah. Well, let me be very clear here. There are those, particularly in Europe, who say that you have to have authority to use force. There has to be some independent approval for what the Obama administration is about to do. That's a very European approach to life. The American approach has always been fundamentally different. Our approach is we have the right to act to defend American interest unless there's an express prohibition somewhere. There are no express prohibitions around here. As I say, as a matter of policy, I think this impending attack is a bad idea. But as a matter of American authority, we have all we need, and I am delighted that the Obama administration may be on the verge of proving that yet again.
I have to ask why you oppose force.
Because I think that the strongest argument that those who want to use force have is to set up a deterrent against the use of chemical weapons or biological or nuclear weapons. I think that is the correct analysis, but it's very clear that the Obama administration is going to do very nearly the opposite. Prime Minister David Cameron, before his humiliating defeat in Parliament yesterday, spoke of a proportionate response from the allies, and the President himself has said that our response would be a shot across the bow of the Assad regime. Now, of course, by definition, a shot across the bow doesn't hit anything. But that, under any circumstances, a proportionate response, a warning shot, will not establish deterrence. Deterrence is established by a substantial military action when the red line is crossed, the red line the President drew. Let me give you the historical example of how to deal with the threat of a communist invasion of Europe during the 1950s and 1960s. The United States didn't say to the Soviets, if you invade Western Europe, we will respond proportionately. The Eisenhower Dulles Doctrine in response was called massive retaliation. the communists, if the Soviets invade Western Europe, we will launch a first-strike nuclear attack against Soviet targets, meaning, in effect, if you attack, we will turn the Soviet Union into a charcoal briquette. That's how you establish deterrence, and that's about as far away from what Obama's about to do that one can imagine.
You're not alone in your analysis that it has to be done without military intervention. In fact, Secretary Kerry said, don't think, American public, this will look anything like Afghanistan. There won't be boots on the ground. They could change their mind, certainly at a later date. I think they are probably talking about an initial attack. But I had a conversation very late into the evening last night with General Jack Keane, four-star general, who really believes that we could do this in even less than 3 days. If you were to have that conversation with him and hear that it could be accomplished and be effective and let the rest of the world know that the United States can and will not stand for this, would you change your mind?
No, because this is not an abstract discussion. That kind of attack would take place in the specific context of an ongoing civil war in Syria. And the kind of massive military attack that would create a deterrent effect would also tip the balance in this civil war. I have nothing good to say about the Assad regime, God knows, but the opposition is a very mixed bag. One can assume there are some people who profess democratic ideals. They'd be foolish if they didn't and still expect Western assistance. But there are other major components of the opposition that are al-Qaeda or terrorists, and then there's a big element of the opposition that's Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah.
So why we want to do anything that would risk bringing terrorists or the Muslim Brotherhood to power is beyond me.
Although it's hard to imagine a group worse than what Assad has created. But, you know,